During World War II, it was the first conflict in which women took up arms and fought against their enemies en masse. Inside countries which were subjected to German invasion, many women became female soldiers or members of the resistance, in which they tried in secret to carry out acts of sabotage and defiance. Some women even lured enemy officers to their deaths and assassinations. But many were subjected to terror at the hands of their enemies too, and as the Wehrmacht rampaged into different countries, they inflicted a huge amount of suffering onto the female population, committing large-scale assault. But women did fight back, but if they were captured by the Germans, then they faced terrifying ordeals of torture and eventual execution if they did not give over any information. Much of these executions were carried out in public, in full view of not just other German soldiers who were acting as the executioners, but local people, and this was done with a chilling reason in mind. In this video we look at the public executions of those brave women who fought against the German army. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The German mentality when it came to female soldiers was very strict. Hitler and the Nazis thought that women had absolutely no place at all on the battlefield, and that their position should have been at home looking after children, and their husbands when they returned from either work or fighting. They also wanted women to have as many children as possible for the Reich and Empire, and they did not want to use women in a combat capacity. At the end of the war, some German women were used in artillery detachments or in flak units, targeting aircraft which were trying to bomb German cities and towns. There was an SS Women's Auxiliary Corps, and these women were given non-combat roles, and they supported the SS, with around 10,000 women taking up this position. But the fixed German and Nazi policies for women led to the rough treatment of those who they came across during World War II, who were trying to either resist or repel the occupations or military advances. Most famously known for their female soldiers were the Red Army, and Stalin to begin with did not want to use women on the battlefield. But following Operation Barbarossa, when the lands were invaded and his army was put to the sword by the Germans, Stalin relented and women were used in different capacities. Some became aviators, bombing enemy positions, but there were also many women, around 2,500 of them, who became army snipers. These had a large kill count, well over 11,000 during the war, and they would crawl through ruined cities such as Leningrad and Stalingrad, and then pick off high-ranking targets. The women were greatly celebrated by Stalin, and some were even awarded the highest honour, the Hero of the Soviet Union award. But if they were captured by the enemy, they were treated awfully. They were usually beaten, and there was instructions passed from the German military high command as to what to do with the women soldiers. They were to be tortured for information and then shot, with some commanders even just ordering their men to execute the women on sight and then dump them at the side of a road. It was very rough, and the Nazis believed that this treatment was, in their eyes, necessary, as they viewed female soldiers as a backward policy of Stalinism and Bolshevism that, in their eyes, needed eradicating. There are images and photographs that exist showing women looking terrified after their capture, with fear in their eyes, telling a story of how they felt, but minutes later they were most probably shot. Some were executed in public by gunshot, in front of other soldiers, with an executioner ruthlessly issuing a Genickschuss or a neck shot, finishing them off after they were told to kneel down. Often this was done in front of other Wehrmacht soldiers to ensure that these men knew exactly what to do with the women if they found themselves capturing them. Lots of young women also joined the Partisan resistance group, the pro-Soviet forces who defied and attacked German occupiers. This included a number of teenagers, and they would conduct work such as evacuating injured personnel from the battlefield, rescuing prisoners of war from capture by smuggling false papers, and even gathering food for other partisans who were living in remote locations. Partisans were a constant thorn in the side of the Germans, as they conducted raids too, aimed to disrupt and cause chaos. One famous female fighter, Zoya Kozlodenskaya, was just a teenager when she was executed. She was brutally tortured for information after her capture, and she was then brought out to a square in Petroshevo, a small village. She had been stripped and beaten, and was tortured with 200 lashes, and her body was brutally showing the signs of her ordeal. In the centre of the village was a gallows, and she was forced to wear a plaque saying the words "House Burner." Hundreds of local people were forced to watch, and on the gallows she cried out, "You hang me now, but I'm not alone. There are 200 million of us. You can't hang us all. They will avenge me." She was then hanged on the gallows, and the Germans left her body up on the gallows for several weeks, and her remains were badly mutilated and desecrated. Lepa Radic, another teenager, was also subjected to a public execution. She had fired against the German soldiers who were fighting the Partisans in the mountain regions, and she was captured and jumped by many of her enemies. After being tortured and giving away nothing, she was brought out to a square in a small village. Hundreds of people had been gathered to see her execution and to send a message. The German army executioner had her stand on a box, and he placed a noose around the teenager's neck. He asked her many times to give her information to the Germans, but she refused to do so. With the noose around her neck, which had been secured to a tree, Lepa Radic was then hanged in front of the crowd, with the box she was stood on removed, and it took a number of minutes for her to slowly strangle to death. In the Netherlands, there were a number of female resistors who carried out acts of assassination too. Hannie Schaft became known as the girl with the red hair, and she was a prominent assassin who worked with a couple of sisters, the Overstegens, to take out enemies. They often lured Germans to their deaths in woods, with the promise of relations, and then executed them in cold blood. Hannie Schaft was even placed on the Nazis' most wanted list. But when she was captured in the final months of the war, the Germans ruthlessly dealt with her. She told her executioners that, "I shoot better," as the executioner, when he fired a shot at her head in close range, actually somehow missed. The second shot was delivered more successfully. She was executed in private and not in the full view of others, but her body was then covered over and dumped in a sand dune. But within Germany, there were lots of women who were actually subverting the Nazis and the Third Reich themselves, and who were involved in resistance groups. They might not have been involved in fighting and taking out high-value targets, but the Nazis believed that those who did not support them were also traitors. The Germans had a similar pattern with how they dealt with German women who were captured. First, they subjected them to torture inside of prisons and interrogation centres, as they wanted to shut down larger resistance networks and bring many others to trial. If these women did not hand over any information, then they were classed as lost causes and were scheduled for court dates with infamous Nazi judges who berated and screamed at them before sentencing them to death. Inside of different German prisons, which were set up as centralised execution sites, the women were usually executed on the Fallbeil, the falling axe, or the all-metal compact guillotine. Young women such as Sophie Scholl, who had tried to convince others to resist along with other members of the White Rose movement, were executed on the guillotine, and it was known that executioners could take a head off someone within a matter of seconds of them entering the chamber. This was not a public execution. The Nazis knew that executing women in public using a guillotine would have an adverse effect on their support. But inside places such as Plötzensee prison, thousands lost their heads on the guillotine in very quick time. Inside concentration camps too, many female prisoners were subjected to public execution for breaking the rules of a camp, and some were condemned for trying to escape sites such as Auschwitz. The women who were subjected to this were usually hanged on the gallows in front of thousands of people at roll call, so that a message could be sent to others not to defy the guards. Mala Zimmerbaum was a female prisoner of Auschwitz-Birkenau who was well liked by the other prisoners, and she tried to escape the camp with her boyfriend. She did somehow get out of Auschwitz, but was caught and captured weeks later, and on the 15th of September 1944, she was taken to be hanged inside the women's camp. The death sentence was read, and Mala tried to slash her own wrists, but she put up a fight and tried to start a revolt, but other guards were furious at this, and one SS guard allegedly grabbed her arm and broke it, before other guards knocked her to the ground. It was then said that infamous female guard Maria Mandel ordered Mala Zimmerbaum to be taken to the crematoria, where she was allegedly then burned alive inside the oven. One thing to consider is that many other camp inmates witnessed this, and some said she actually died on the cart on the way to the crematoria, but everyone saw the brutality of her final minutes. So for the Germans, they dealt with women incredibly seriously during World War II, especially those who picked up arms against them or who defied their regime and order. It was often in public that these women suffered terribly, in front of the eyes of thousands of others, to send a message to people not to commit the same crimes and for them to submit to the Reich and the will of the Nazis. Still today there will be many women who were executed who bravely fought the German invaders, who are buried under the soil, and their stories are waiting to be uncovered 80 years on from the end of World War II. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.